We are creatures of desire. What we most desire is meaning. What makes us suffer most is a lack of meaning.
The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. Marital therapist, author, and communications trainer Andrew G. Marshall invites guests from all walks of life to discuss what makes life meaningful.
Hello, I'm Andrew G. Marshall. Welcome to The Meaningful Life. We're available on Apple, Spotify, Podbean, and wherever you find your podcasts. Have you lost your way? Does life seem just one thing after another? Do you ever look back to a time when you knew what you wanted and the world felt full of possibilities? You're probably thinking about your childhood in a sense of wonder. But beyond a few moments of warm nostalgia, you shrug your shoulders and get back to pressing business matters, cleaning the house, and raising children. But my witness today on The Meaningful Life believes you should listen to the child you once were and rediscover your sense of wonder, magic, and possibility. It can guide you not just back onto the right path, but orientate you for the rest of your life. LAURA Munson is a best-selling author, memoirist, and founder of the acclaimed Haven Writing Retreat. She's also the author of a new book, The Wild Way, Stories and Teaching to Uncover Your Wonder. Let's start by going back to your childhood and a time when you lived fully in wonder. Give us a little taste of Laura Jr.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show, Andrew, and for putting your good work into the world. We need to be living meaningful lives and also wonderful lives. So I do think that now, listen, I don't have letters after my name in the field of wonder. And if I'm not a wonderologist, but if I am, then we all are, because it is ours by birthright. We are born with it, regardless of abuse. Wonder is often what gets us through abuse. But I believe that we have our wonder intact from the beginning. And to me, the word wonder can be a lofty concept. So I broke it down one day. I live in Montana in the U.S., and I was wandering around in the woods, as one does, and I sat down on a stump, and I thought, what is behind the word wonder? And it occurred to me that it was curiosity, yes, but also awe. And when we're children, awe is not a silly-frilly idea. Awe is how we learn to walk and connect with the world and eat, etc. It's how we survive, by paying attention. And so I believe that what has happened, at least in traditional education, at least in this country, but I think probably in many countries, many places in the world, is that we get slotted as children. So it's, here's your wonder. Why is the sky blue? Is there a God? What happens after we die? Those kinds of questions, that innate curiosity, are often answered or at least entertained by the adult world. Not always, but often, until it's not. Then we get into traditional education where we get slotted. Okay, you're a brain, so you're academic. You're a jock, so you're athletic. You're artsy, so you're creative. But what happens is that we forget our wonder in pursuit of those slots in many cases. And so I hear a lot in my life as a teacher, a writing coach, and a retreat leader, a speaker, writer, all of it. I've lost my creativity. I'm not creative at all. I hear that one. It breaks my heart. And that's really what had me sit down on that stump that day. What's behind creativity? And I thought wonder. And then what's behind wonder? Curiosity, which we're heavy on in our world. But what about awe? What about stopping for awe?
But we have only certain things we're allowed to be curious about.
Talk to me about that before I put words to it and thoughts.
Well, let's just take gender roles first off. There are things that boys are allowed to be curious about and the things that girls are allowed to be curious about. And immediately you can go, as a small child, you can think everything is interesting, but, boys have to play with soldiers and girls are playing with dolls. Give me an example of you as a curious child so we can get a sense of you.
Well, I think that, first of all, per your point, I grew up in the 70s, and there was an album, good old-fashioned vinyl album that came out called Free to Be You and Me, put together by Marlo Thomas, Gloria Steinem, Alan Alda, and a bunch of other people. And one of the songs in it was William Has a Doll. And so it might be fun for you to listen to it because it really it invited the permission to play with gender roles in a different way than traditionally. But for me, as a little girl, I was constantly asking why. Why? And I loved playing in sand. And I remember I grew up on the shores of Lake Michigan outside of Chicago and then spent a lot of time in northern Wisconsin at a lake. And I just wanted to hang out and dig in the sand and play with rocks and then find other kids that wanted to do the same. And there were plenty of them all around, even in like a public park, a sandbox. You watch children in a sandbox, or if you have children and you've brought them to a public park or a beach or a lake, they just go running together. They don't look at each other and notice their differences. They probably don't notice their gender. They just feel the energy of each other and that they want to play. And they sit down and when they're little. And I was one of these kids, and I'm sure you were too. So many of us were, where it's not like we're not yet in that greedy place or that place of comparison where my shovel's better than yours or your bucket is bigger than mine. Or instead it's just, hey, you want to play? Let's, trade shovels and see what that's like. Let's build castles and build a moat to connect them so that our dragons and gargoyles can play. And then all of a sudden, I've worked with lots of educators right around age 12, probably earlier if you've been through abuse. That wonder starts to fade and the measuring sticks come in. I'm not good enough. Somebody did it better than I ever could. And that inner critic is born that tells us these stories that take away our wonder. And I like to talk a lot about that, but I'll take a pause here.
Well, I used to be a writer that went into schools. I had the same box that I took into every school. There was a great big cardboard box, and in it I put lots of writing prompts. And so the children had to come up, they had to close their eyes, put their hand in the box and pull something out. And what they pulled out, they had to write a story about. And so I used to have a big old bone that my dog had chewed, and that used to be in there. And when they're 9 years old, they say, this is a bone that you can look through the end of it. It's a telescope and a dog can see into the future. And I thought, brilliant. I want to read that story. A dog that has a bone that can see into the future. That's a film that I would turn up to. It's a book I would read. The very same bone is pulled out by a 12-year-old, and they're into realism soap opera, and somebody's been buried under the patio, and that's all. A bone is a bone, whereas to a child, a bone can be anything you want it to be.
Yes, I also I volunteer in the schools, and I go into the 5th grade and in the 7th grade, and it's so similar to what you're talking about. I don't go into the 6th grade only because I don't have a friend who teaches that would let me come in and corrupt her students with wonder and these crazy ideas that, of course, are not crazy at all. But I go in, I love your prompts. I go in and I do a sort of a different kind of writing prompt, and then we share. And the 5th graders, they cannot wait to do these. They're so excited. Their little faces are all red and their hands are all sweaty on their pencils or their pens, and they just can't wait to write. And then share. They want to share. Their hands are raised. Then I go into the 7th grade, and it breaks my heart every time. Same kids 2 years later. They're looking down. Their body language is closed. They have this kind of, their whole vibe is don't call on me. Don't make me have to express myself. And so because I've worked with over 1,000 people now at my Haven Writing Retreats, many of them are educators again, and many are in your field. They're psychologists, psychiatrists. We have a neurosurgeon in there. And they've told me that inner critic, which I call the inner critter, because why not be playful with him or her, whatever pronoun you want to use, is usually hatched around age 12, which is 6th grade usually. And so think about, like, I turned 59 this summer. She's had a lot of practice. And what I've learned, however, in my first book, the memoir, This Is Not the Story You Think It Is, which was published in 9 countries, including Germany and UK and lots of places. So I went around the world. It was fascinating. The book was like a field study culturally. And the book was really about finding emotional liberation by tracking your thought patterns. And so at that time, I thought I could make my thought patterns serve me so they would stop sabotaging me, which meant that I could exile that inner critic. But I realized on a stage in front of 2,000 women at a big women's conference, I realized I'm never going to get rid of that voice. I'm just not. And so I'm going to stop acting like I can. Instead, I'm going to think about that inner critter like a scared child. And when she's really scared, she's really mean. And so now when I hear that voice in my head, and especially as a writer, and you understand this, there's lots of rejection in our field. And we can hear in our voice before we even put pen to paper, who do you think you are writing this? Somebody else already did it better than you ever could. You don't have the right credentials. It's self-indulgent at best. You can be stopped before that pen even hits the page. But what if we looked at her, I'll use that pronoun, as a scared child who's having like a night terror or a night haunt. So it's like semi-conscious, comes into your room, throwing things around, hurling things around, words, nouns. What if we said, sweetheart, you're just having a really bad dream. Let's walk you back to bed. I'll rub your back until you calm down. And that's how I have learned to treat my inner critter, like a scared child. And I especially know when she's being really mean that she's really scared and she just needs a nap. She's so tired, Andrew. She's so exhausted from being so scared and mean. And it really helps.
Because I tell my clients to think of it as like a board meeting, that they're allowed a seat at the table because the critic might have something useful to say. You know, they're allowed to present a paper to the board, but they're not allowed to be chairman of the board. And if you try and lock them out of the board meeting, all they're going to do is bang on the boardroom door. So, you know, let them come in, let them have their say. And sometimes it might be useful, sometimes not. But everybody has a seat at the table. We just need to have some positive characters around the table, not just the inner critter who often is a bit of a child.
I really like that. I do this exercise on my retreats where I ask people to tune into their thought patterns in a very broken down way when it comes to doing something that they haven't done yet in their lives that would be absolutely life-changing for themselves. That's doable, but they're resisting. And I have them break down a conversation in their head between the yes voice, which really wants to do this thing, and the no voice, which is resisting it. And I ask them to consider exactly what you're saying with your clients, that the no voice isn't necessarily bad or wrong, and the yes voice isn't necessarily right or good. The no voice gets a place, in your words, at the table. And sometimes the no voice has a better idea. But we can learn by mind awareness how to tune into our thought patterns and learn how we sabotage ourselves, because that's what I'm really interested in. If we're going to get back to our childhood wonder, if you think about it like a garden hose that's full of water, it's like let the water flow. And the child in us knows how to do this. It's the adult in us that kinks the hose and then comes up with all sorts of reasons why we shouldn't entertain yes or no. We should push ourselves into the slot that we think we belong in. And I think that's a grand disservice to ourselves. And it all begins with mind awareness, in my opinion.
And you develop a character that you call the inner champion as well. So tell us about the inner champion.
Yeah, well, you can't push it, right? Like, I'm not asking people to be Pollyanna about it. I'm asking people to be true. When I teach writing, I say, you don't have to write good. You just have to write true. And what I mean by that, and this applies to fiction or nonfiction.
And life, to be perfectly honest, as well.
Yes.
You don't have to be good, you have to be true.
I believe that. And with the reason why I love fiction so much, while I only have one published novel, as I told you before we started the interview, I've written, I think, like 23 unpublished novels, and many of them were exercises in learning. But the reason why I love fiction is that I think it's truer than true, like distilled reality, and we're not beholden to the facts. So if there are listeners out there that want to write a memoir, which should read like a novel starring you as the main character, your life, sometimes it's harder to find your truth when it's your life and the people in it. Sometimes it helps to turn your truth into fiction. But if truth is what you're after, you will find your way back to your wonder. It's in you. I don't believe it can die. Do you?
I think it can be given some mortal blows. I have clients that find it very difficult. I will do a guided meditation, and in the guided meditation, I'll say we're going to shoot these branches up above the moon and the stars. And they are so literal. They say, but I couldn't do that because that's so many thousands of miles. How could a tree go all those thousands of miles? And they've been condemned by literalness, and they can't see the poetry of, the tree reaching beyond the moon and the stars. In a poetic sense, it's perfectly possible. In a strict scientific sense, no, trees can't grow that tall, but we live in a very literal world nowadays.
Yes. Think of that movie. Did you see the movie? Is it called Life is Beautiful with Roberto Benigni. I think it was about a father and a son in a concentration camp during World War II. And I mean, I always think about that when I think, can wonder be killed? I mean, I love the example you used that thinking literally can kill wonder. I believe that it would be fun to parse that. I might just have to write a personal essay about that question itself, because it's all about the questions, as Rainer Maria Rilke said, love the questions themselves in his beautiful book, Letters to a Young Poet. But in that movie, here they are in a concentration camp, and the father is turning the whole thing into a play as a way of survival. So you can always find play. My friend has cancer right now, and it's not looking great for her lifespan. And I've never seen her be more playful. And she keeps saying, why not? Why not find play? Not as a silly, frilly idea. And so I will bring this into a new layer that we haven't discussed yet. And I think that without wonder, curiosity, and awe, we can't find empathy. And without empathy, we don't have a civilization. If I can't wonder about somebody who's quite different from myself, wonder what it's like to walk around in their shoes, especially if I consider them a villain, then how are we to further our civilization? We have to be able to not necessarily accept somebody's thoughts, ideas, behavior, but it helps to understand what it might be like to walk around in their shoes. So I would call that radical empathy. Radical empathy is what I believe connects us with one another, no matter what our backgrounds are, our belief systems, our faith bases, etc. And so this book is very much an answer, the wild why, stories and teachings to uncover your wonder. I know that we live our life in stories. And so while this is not a traditional self-help book at all, I rarely write them. I've never written one, and I rarely read them unless they're story-driven. I'm interested in the story, and I know you are too, because we live our lives in stories. So this book is very story-forward with takeaways and also writing prompts, but it's mostly inviting you to tell your stories.
So tell me a story that might help us learn how to find our wonder.
Well, I would love to answer that question. And there's a chapter in this book, The Wild Why, called The Tiger in the Room. And it's toward the end of the book. And it is a story, really is a call to action. And a lot of this book is from a television producer friend of mine who lives in New York City, has a big job at CNN with a show that probably people globally have heard of. I won't mention it. But she took a year off because she was sick of seeing regular, everyday sorts of people not get on the show because of a hurricane or a horrible disaster someplace that ended up being on the show. So the more kind of evergreen, regular people sorts of guests would get bumped or not even invited on it at all. So she took a year off and drove around the United States in her truck and interviewed everyday sorts of people. And she went to small little towns. And she contacted me. She'd seen me on Good Morning America. And she said, I'd like to meet you in this little town that I want to go to. I Google mapped it or whatever she did. It's a 7-hour drive south of where I live. Montana's a big state. And she said, I want us to hang out together all day long and tell each other stories, especially our story. Like, what is the story that you want to tell right now? And I said, I'll be there. She said, bring your guitar. I know you like to play the guitar, sing, and so I met her down there and we met at this little town bar, which is it's like a little pub in Ireland, or, it's just like maybe there's a mercantile and a bar or a saloon and maybe like a little, I don't know, that's about a gas station, right? All in one place. So we met there and we talked about how we feel like we're always about to, like the minute we want to really have our lives feel like we're in that flow, that garden hose water, not all kinked and braced against, but going with, there's often this feeling of like fangs on the back of your neck. And in Montana, we have mountain lions. So it might be a real thing. And grizzly bears, although the grizzly bears, they're not that interested in us. I'm not so sure about the mountain lions. And she said, I go through life working at CNN feeling like this all the time. Like there's a tiger in the room that's about to pounce on me. And it's driving me forward all the time. Go, 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 go. Which is why she took that year off to go be and hear stories. And so we shared about what that tiger in the room feels like to us. A lot of it is around ambition. And both of us, both she and I, are highly ambitious people. In many ways, this book, The Wild Why, is about what plagued me for years, and that is ambition addiction. That's what I call it. Letting the world outside of us define our well-being. And that is an insane way to live your life. It does not serve us to allow things outside of our control to define our well-being. So we spent a long amount of time telling each other the stories in this teeny little bar in this teeny little town. And so a concrete answer to your great question, and this is a call to action in The Wild Why, find somebody who's safe, somebody who really wants to listen, and make room to both tell and hear each other's stories. And when I just went across the United States doing my book tour for 6 weeks, I was in New York City and Chicago and Boston, all over the place. I said, and I mean like at least 2 hours, and people laughed. They thought I was being facetious, but I'm not. So when you're buying broccoli in the grocery store and someone says, "How are you?" it's okay to say I'm fine. But if it's somebody that feels safe enough and you're not fine at all, you're bashed and bleeding inside, you might say something like, I'd love to really answer that question. And it takes some time because there are a lot of stories involved in it. Could we have tea together? Or could we have an evening together? Could we have a whole Sunday afternoon together? And if that person says no, great. They're not the right person, but find that person who really wants to share. And that's, for me to even have to be prescriptive about the telling of your story and how you really are, saddens me, because back to being children, they're sitting around in that sandbox talking about their life. They're talking about, look at the cloud. That reminds me of my Aunt Matilda. The other day she came over and, we live our life in stories. We squelch them because we're afraid that we're going to get hurt by people's reactions.
And I'm interested in you talking about ambition, because there was a sentence in your book that I pulled out. Addiction to ambition destroys our intuition. And there seems to be a connection between wonder, awe, and curiosity and intuition.
I believe that. Isn't it all about intuition? I've got a book coming out about writing next year. So just to be clear, your wonderful listeners, this is not a book for writers, although there is a writing component in it. You can skip over those prompts. They're at the end of each chapter. But I have a book about writing for writers coming out next year. And in it, I say, writing isn't just writing. It's living in a way that helps you find what it is that you have to say, which is to say that it's about getting back to your intuition, the unspoken knowing inside of you. And then this is something that I don't say very often, but I feel like I can say this to you and anybody who's listening to your show. It's not ultimately about the words at all, in my opinion. And I'm a word wanderer. So are you. We wander in our words. For me, I'm very vocal. I'm also just very prolific with putting words down. But I've learned, I started writing like with all my might. I've been writing all my life in journals, but like finished college, 1988, and I committed my life to the writing life. No matter what was going on in my life, I was always writing. And what I've learned is that it's not ultimately about the words. It's about what's behind them and what's in between them and what's left in their wake. What's behind them, what's in between them, and what's left in their wake, which means that words are energy, just like thoughts are matter. And that energy is even behind intuition itself. But we know what that is. I don't think we have to go out into the world to find it, although that is a call to action in the book. That's another subject. But it's a return to something we already know that's deep inside of us that is begging us to release itself.
Yes. I think that the most important thing we can do ourselves, and it's what I'm sort of trying to do on the retreats that I lead, is getting people in contact with their intuition, because their intuition knows what is best for them and the path they need to go on. And people always say, how do I find my intuition? And that's a very difficult question to answer. But I'm beginning to think the first thing is just to find wonder and curiosity, because you've sort of got to get into your body to be able to be intuitive. And the way to get into your body is through your senses. And the way to get into your senses, I think, is through wonder. You've got to go, I do my retreats beside a beautiful lake, and watching the mist in the morning as it comes off the lake and watching the swans swim round it, you are connected to a huge sense of wonder. And then you're connected to your body, and you might find your intuition, but we've got to find a way there. So that's what sort of interested me about your book.
Thank you. I'm going to share a story because you like stories that I think perfectly illuminates exactly what you're saying. All of it, actually, everything we've talked about. So in the early 1990s, I lived in Seattle, Washington, Northwest, Pacific Northwest. And I was taking a hike up the side of Mount Rainier, a big, huge 14,000-foot volcano. And I was on the side of it, not going to the top, but going to a lake. And I went to this lake as much as I could because it was beautiful. It reminded me of lakes that I got to hang out with as a child. I am a lake person. I also love rivers, but lakes are, like I say, I'm a lake baby. But at that time in my life, I was in my early 20s, and I would time myself to see how fast I could get to the lake, how fast I could get to the lake. And this was before we had Fitbits and, 10,000 steps a day. But I was in that ambition. You hear that? It was like, how fast can I get to the lake? One day, probably after 10 different hikes, I lived there for 5 years. I was walking along quickly the path, and I saw two women who both had like white hair and lots of smile wrinkles on their face. And they were sitting on a log bench with these beautiful, obviously handmade walking sticks. And they were just sitting there having a little chat and maybe having a little something to eat. And they just had these glorious smiles. And my ambition, I decided to put a pause on it because I thought, I want to know those women and why they're so happy. And so I sat down and I said, hello, I'm Laura. What are your names? And we started to chat. Those are beautiful walking sticks. And we got into a big conversation about how they'd made the walking sticks. And I said, have you ever been on this trail before? And they looked at each other knowingly, lovingly, wonderfully, meaningfully. And they said, yes, we've been doing this since we were your age. We do it once a year. And every time we go slower and slower on purpose. Now, that's a lesson right there. And I learned it. I was so ready to receive it in my intuitive part of my being, but my mind struggled. No, I need to get there because I need to break my record. And so I think about that all the time, especially right around death and birth, going slowly, being careful, being in awe, allowing awe. Again, this is not like an extraneous, silly, frilly concept. This is how we lower our blood pressure. This is how we allow our breath to fill our lungs and calm us and ground us. We have so much anxiety and depression and death by suicide in this world right now, in part because we are so fast as our culture and so quick to, we see a rainbow. Hey, Siri, tell me what makes a rainbow. Now we're looking at our phone and not at the rainbow. We need to stop and look at the rainbow. Proverbially and literally, how long does a rainbow take to live? Its life is what, like 4 minutes? If we can't stop for 4 minutes to observe a rainbow in awe, then I think we need to seriously look at what might be in the way of our well-being.
There's another idea that you have is that when you have your intuition and you'll wonder why, you will hear your calling. Now, I could understand, I'm going to be slightly devil's advocate. I can understand that you have a calling to writing because it feels like a very strong one. And, I've got a calling to talking and listening and writing as well, words too. But does everybody have a calling?
I hope so. I mean, whenever I write that word, calling, I kind of have an inner cringe because it sounds entitled. It sounds precious. And so maybe a way of looking at calling is simply a return again to what's deeply inside of you that is natural. When people, I often say, when you're in your true purpose or your flow, when you're in your ease, not that it's easy. So if somebody says, I want to write, and then in come all the refusals, I don't have anything important to say. Somebody else said it better than I ever could. I'm not creative. I'm stuck. I don't have a voice. Especially find your voice, that promise. I always say it's in you. It's just about returning to it. Again, that is a very intuitive place. And the way that you're in that place, for me at least, is when there's ease. I think of it like I'm walking down a hallway and there are doors all around. There's a door right in front of me and that's the door I want to open. But there are other doors around me. It's kind of a dark hallway usually. And I get to that door and I'm hell-bent on getting it open. If I have to bash my head until I've got blood dripping down my cheeks and I've broken my nose, by gum, I'm going to open that door. But that's ambition. And ambition is fear-driven. What if we looked over our shoulder and there was an open door with a beautiful field full of wildflowers and mountain bluebirds saying, come, let's go play. I've got a picnic prepared for you. There's a trail. I know the way. For some reason, so many of us say, no, that's too easy. I need to get this one door open. And so what I'm inviting people to do in my teaching and in this book is to find the ease in your life. Not that it's easy. A lot of people who are writing books, for instance, are writing about really horrific things that have happened to them. And you well know this from your practice. But we can still find ease. And the way I know that I'm in that place of ease, at least with writing, but it's the same with living, is when I lose track of time. But you have to give yourself an opportunity to lose track of time. And people might say, but I got a job, I got kids, I got bills to pay. So do I. So do we all. We don't all have kids or a job, but we all have responsibilities that dog us and come after us like that tiger in the room. But if we don't take time to go slowly, then I worry about our well-being. Like when I do the dishes, I try to do it mindfully. When I'm doing chores, and in Montana, I live off of wood burning heat for the most part. And that takes methodical living, chopping wood. I have running water, but I have friends that don't. Going slowly and being careful is a way not to just to practice mindfulness, but to live in a way that's full of health. My friends that live off the grid go so slowly, and they're some of the happiest people I've ever met.
This is another idea of yours that I think is worth exploring. How does the wonder wound attack the wild why?
Okay, so I can read to you where I discovered my wonder wound. I knew it. It was in me. I didn't realize that it was in my 4th grade journal. So that's like age 9. I have all my journals from the beginning. And this journal, I was having one of those dark nights of the soul. And I just couldn't go back to sleep. And I was just trying to understand how to interrupt this constant reel of fear telling me all these scared things. And it really attacks for me like at 4. A lot of people, it's like at 3 a.m., like the witching hour. So I went down to my office, and this scene is in the book, and I went through all my journals. I really had never read my journals because who wants to go back and read all that angsty stuff? But I kept it for a reason I didn't know, and I'm really glad I did, because this was in my 4th grade journal, Andrew. I talk too much. I ask too many questions. I cry too easily. I laugh too loud. I'm too sensitive. I'm not sure what that means. And I feel bad about all of it. I talk too much. I ask too many questions. I cry too easily. I laugh too loud. I'm too sensitive. I don't know what that means. Or says, I'm not sure what that means. And I feel bad about all of it. Laura Munson, 4th grade journal, age 9. That is so sad to me. And think about how that kind of wounded thought pattern begets more of those wounded thought patterns that then snowball and snowball until they're so habituated we don't even know they're going on in our minds. 9 out of 10 people who come on my retreats will say, I'm stuck. I don't have a voice. I'm not creative. You can bet when they were really little playing in that sandbox, they didn't have those stories. Those stories were implanted on them somewhere. Somebody said something to them, maybe just one person. You're not creative. Maybe it was on a playground. Maybe it was a teacher. Maybe it was a parent. Maybe it was a babysitter. Maybe it was a person who was supposed to love you like a best friend, said something to you and you believed it. And you don't even remember that it happened. It's just part of what you've absorbed as your truth. And I invite you to go back to the place, the genesis of that story, and look at it as a wound that can heal. And how do you heal it? Well, there are lots of ways that I'm offering in this book. You won't find bullet points, tips, tricks, 10 easy steps. That's not the way I fly. You'll find stories and the invitation to tell your own and to live your life in a certain way. It's not all writing. It's not all telling. There's lots of different things in this book, calls to action, to help you get back to that wound around your self-expression and your relationship with your self-expression, your creative, the essence of who you are, your creative self-expression, and start to heal it. And I believe that the child in you not only wants you to, but needs you to.
Well, when I read your inner diary from your fourth grade, which I've actually copied out for my notes here as well, I thought, hang on, Laura's been copying from my diary. Not that I kept a diary, but that I ask too many questions. I cry too easily. I'm too sensitive and I feel bad about it. I didn't have the problem with laughing too loud. But I think a lot of us are given these messages, and sort of understanding these stories and rewriting them is incredibly important, because I have rewritten I'm too sensitive. How could I possibly do this podcast? How could I possibly do my job as a therapist? How could I possibly lead my retreats if I wasn't a sensitive person? The wounds that you had as a child are the very things you're probably going to need going forward. I mean, asking too many questions, well, you can never have too many questions. Being in contact with your feelings, laughing too loudly, bring it on is all I can say. Come and sit down next to me.
Yes. Well, again, we would have been playing in the sandbox together. And I must say that per what you're sharing with me, and thank you for doing so, being on the road with this book for 6 weeks, and then I'm going back out again, and I've been doing lots of podcasts, and I now do the Wild Why workshop. So I've been doing online 4-part workshops from the Wild Why, from the prompts in it, not just for writers. You can bet it's activating that wound. Because if the wound is you talk too much and I'm up there talking, everything inside of me, like that wound is still alive inside of me saying, stop talking. You talk too much. And so I'm on the verge the whole time of like wanting to burst into tears or just be like, you know what? I don't have anything to say and I talk too much and I'm going to go back to the hotel. But I know that when we put our heart in our hand and are truthful about that wound we have around our self-expression, well, that's when we can cause the world to change. And I saw people sitting in the front row, holding hands, crying. One woman came up to me and just said, can I just stay in this bookstore for, like the rest of my life? I don't want to go back into this world because this is such a worried world right now. And I was a little nervous, that wonder wound started to get very activated when I thought, wow, man, I'm going to go out on the road and talk about wonder when there's so much pain in the world. And then I thought, you know what? This is exactly what we need. And this is the mantra I gave myself. And I did this for my first book too. I give myself permission to be exactly who I am and have it be easy. And there's that ease again, not that it's simple, but have there be that flow. And I used it a lot. And it's a good one for any of you who express yourself past your wound of self-expression. I give myself permission to be exactly who I am and have it be easy. Not like someone else, not better than I am, not worse than I am, but exactly who I am, and find ease in it. And it's possible. And doesn't that just feel relieving to give yourself that break instead of having to be, I never get nervous going on these podcasts because I'm not trying to be anything other than who I am. And that's what this whole book is about. And it takes me a long time to write a book. This book took me 10 years to write. So I really understand what it is. And so it's not about me, really. I just get to be the messenger.
So when you say I ask too many questions, one of your questions is one that I'm going to adopt myself, which is instead of asking people, what do you do for a living, which is a terrible question. And in fact, at my men's retreats, I ban them from actually asking this question. But here is one that you could put in its place. What do you like to do? And I don't think I've ever been asked that question. And it's a really good question to be asked. What do you like to do?
Yeah, well, I've lived in a small town in Montana near a major national park where there's a ski resort. So it's year-round fun around here if you like the outdoors. So let's just break down your question to the phrase, what do you do? Let's do it that way. What do you do? So living here for 30 years, coming from, I went to a hardcore New England prep school where pretty much you were trained to go be successful in life by society's constructs, meaning make money, join the forces of, people that have incomes and 401k and investments and even probably marry and children and just like societal prowess, like, excellence by society's constructs again. When I moved here, there were many people that I met that had never been educated past high school, who didn't have jobs that they were necessarily proud of. They were just trying to make ends meet. So I learned very quickly not to use city thinking. So like when I lived in New York City or Chicago or Boston or Seattle, even if you said, what do you do? Somebody would answer with what they do for a living. Mm-hmm. When I moved here, I would say, what do you do? Thinking they were going to tell me what they do for a living. And, clean toilets, bartend, work on the ski hill, but people would say, they would answer to that question. What do you do? Oh, I ski. I kayak. I ride horses. I climb mountains. I ice climb, etc. And I thought, whoa, this is such a different and important mindset. And so when I started to go back home and I travel a lot to different cities, I would say, what do you like to do? Because if I said, what do you do? They would say, oh, I run a hedge fund or whatever. And not that there's anything wrong with having ambition. But if it runs you, if it takes away your joy, well, then is that what we're after? And I think that's why so many people, when they retire, they move to a place like where I live. And so now when I say, what do you like to do to people who live in like cities and suburbs, places that are very different from where I live, their eyes are like dim and they'll say, oh, well, I work at a blah, blah, blah. And then I'll say, no, what do you like? What do you like to do? Oh, what do I like to do? Oh, I didn't hear that. They don't even hear that. Like. Oh, and their eyes light up. I like to ski. I like to play in the sand. I like to travel. So I just think that's so important to ask those sorts of questions. What do you like to do? But also to frame it in your own mind. What do you like to do? And how do you define yourself by society's constructs? There's a big chapter in this book when I realized that success by society's constructs. And I had it. I had a book on the New York Times bestseller list. I was in a limo with a bunch of huge, big 5 New York publishers, big, huge dream on my way to my big first book signing. And I felt nothing in the way of what I thought success would deliver. Instead, I felt grateful. I felt excited because I knew that first book had a great message. This one, in many ways, is sort of a sequel to it in terms of the message. And I turned to the head publicist of Penguin Random House, the top. And I said, I just realized something. Success by society's constructs is a myth, which means failure is too. And this is good news because it comes down to doing the work. And that's the only thing we can control. So you better love what you do. You better love your work. And it doesn't mean, again, that it's always easy. These books are hard to write, as you well know. It's hard to live in your true purpose, whatever that means to you. But you can find ease in the knowledge and the truth that it's within your control, no one else's. That has me have a big sigh of relief.
So in a moment, we're going to look at a letter that's been written in.
The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. Please follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and visit our website, andrewgmarshall.com/podcast, where you can join our supporters club and unlock bonus material and other benefits.
My first men's retreat outside Berlin was a great success.
It was more powerful than I ever imagined. It was a place to feel safe, a little sanctuary to open up in.
I wasn't expecting to make such a deep connection with so many men all at once in such a short time.
The whole experience has been incredibly deep, transformative, and surprising. I've really found it challenging, but I've loved every minute of it.
And I cleared a lot of cobwebs that have been residing inside myself for a little while. It's opened up my thinking to be open to a bigger journey in the future.
And I'm very happy that I did it because that turned out to be exactly everything I hoped it would be and more.
So I'm putting out the call for April 2026 from Thursday the 9th to Sunday the 12th of April. The theme is initiation, transitioning from one phase of your life to the next. Bookings are now open to all men at andrewgmarshall.com.
Your spending, your rules. The Klarna card is your debit card, upgraded, letting you choose how to pay. In full now or plan ahead to pay later. It works anywhere Visa's accepted, and you can earn up to 10% cash back when shopping in the Klarna app. Sign up for the Klarna Card by downloading the Klarna app or learn more at klarna.com/US/Klarna-card. Klarna Card, Klarna Balance, and Card Pay Later plans are issued by WebBank, member FDIC. Cashback terms apply. Offers vary by store.
At Pluralsight, we don't just teach skills. We are building the tech workforce who deliver results fast, accelerated by top-tier content. Lead with confidence. Lead with expertise. Visit us at Pluralsight.com to tap in and learn more.
If you'd like to participate in the program, you can go to my website, andrewgmarshall.com, and you'll find the section on podcasts and come down to the participate in the program. I have listened to many episodes of your podcast, but I still feel that I have no real direction in my life. I have a job that is okay, but is more about paying bills than anything else. When people ask about my passions and what I enjoy doing, I don't really have an answer. Sure, I have crazes, like when I took up the guitar and surfboarding, but nothing really sticks and my loft is full of yesterday's toys. I'm in my mid-30s, and while my friends are settling down and having children, I'm still playing the field. I have a girlfriend and we're good together, but I don't know if she is the one. I keep waiting for clarity, but it doesn't seem to be coming. To be honest, I feel a bit lost, but normally I swallow down the feeling and drift on. Sometimes I ask myself, why can't you settle? At other times, I think I just need to find my passion. But how? What do other people do? Are they lost too, but just put their heads down and get on with it? What do you think, Laura?
I feel the pain from this listener's letter. And again, I'm not a therapist, but as a fellow word wanderer and earth dweller, whatever we all are, I would ask this writer, this listener, to define what okay means. I have a job that is okay. What does okay mean? What's your definition of okay? So I would want to give this person writing prompts. So here are a few of them. What makes okay? What is your definition of okay? What is your baseline understanding of passion? Because we get into passion. When people ask about my passions and what I enjoy doing, I don't really have an answer. Well, what is your baseline understanding of passion? Were you raised to feel that you were allowed to have passion? Can you remember a time in your life when you were living in wonder, awe, and passion? And maybe write that scene. Maybe go back into that place where your passion, let's call it wonder here for the purpose of our conversation today, when it was intact. And why don't you go back to it? I invite you to go back to that intact wonder scene, and maybe it's from yesterday. But given this letter, for this letter writer, I bet this person would need to go back a while ago and really be honest with yourself. Get out of supposed to and should into when was your wonder truly intact? And then I would invite you to write that scene, and I would invite you to have yourself write it in the present tense. I walk into the room and I see Andrew and I feel so safe around him. And I say to Andrew, so in the present tense, so that you're reliving it, not from the vantage point from which you wrote that letter, but from the vantage point of who you were when that wonder was intact, when you had passion. And the passion doesn't need to be something huge. I mean, did you ever remember when you were little? I do. When I would wake up and think, oh, like butterflies in my stomach, like, what is this day going to bring? You know, maybe it's a trip to the hardware store with your dad because you love a trip to the hardware store with your dad and the way it smells, and you're buying seeds for a garden you're going to plant. Or the first time somebody taught you how to fly a kite, and that feeling of the tug of the wind and the kite, that feeling of connecting. So to rewrite it, that's what I think about it. I think that could really help you. And then, I mean, I can take a break. I have some other ideas about yesterday's toys because I think that's a great line. But I'll take a pause here, Andrew.
Well, what I'm wondering is that you're talking about these things that are crazes, like the guitar and the surfboarding. I'm wondering if you had to be great at these things, because we feel all the time we've got to be good. And if we're not good, then somehow these are not actually acceptable pastimes. You know, we have to be good enough to play the guitar with Led Zeppelin sort of kind of thing, and we have to be surfboarding with the Beach Boys. And I once interviewed a very wise Jungian therapist who actually used to be a great artist. He, had great galleries taking his wares, and he decided this wasn't actually for him. And what he said was that the way into his creativity, which was a way of healing and actually feeling good, didn't have to be through the things that you were really good at. Often it was the things you were the second best or third best or even not very good at all. And he was a terrible guitar player, but his creativity came through the guitar playing. He was a great painter, but his creativity actually ultimately didn't come through there. So I'm wondering if you've been trapped in the good trap and that you have to be excellent at these things rather than just what do you like to do? That's the question. What do you like to do? Not what are you good at?
I love that so much. I had a friend who passed away last year, and he always said, I love to ski. I'm not really good at it. I love to play the drums. Not really good at it. I love to sing. Not really good at it. But he lived those things in his life. What he was good at was he was a really great blacksmith. He was great at the forge, and he loved it. And that, I mean, if we can figure out how to make some money off the thing that we love to do, that's pretty great. But he spent as much time as he could singing and playing the drums and skiing and being perfectly fine with the fact that he wasn't really good at any of it. And that is something that I loved about him and learned so much about from him. Also, what is the true measuring stick of being good anyway? Like, here's a little story. The Miami Book Fair is a big book fair and a big destination for authors when they have a book out in this country. And I got asked to speak at it. And they paired me with a really famous American writer who I was a big fan of. And so I was a little intimidated. I was the new kid on the block and she'd been around for a while. And she was very nice to me. And she invited me to like a VIP coffee with a bunch of the keynotes. And these are household names. I bet you would know every one of them. And I sat there at that table and I buttoned up my lip because I just wanted to listen. And I didn't have a whole lot to say about, the career yet. It was more just, I knew a lot about the writing practice, but I wanted to listen. I was also nervous. And here's what they were talking about, Andrew, how they hadn't won Pulitzers, how they had not won a Pulitzer Prize in literature. And I thought, wow, is it ever going to be enough? And 2 weeks later, one of the people at that table won a Pulitzer Prize in literature. And I wanted to call her and say, is it enough? Have you arrived? Is there such a place? And I didn't. But I can bet you that, now she's got a new set of problems. I mean, I didn't check in. I doubt that she said, I've arrived. Mic drop. I bet you anything was like, oh God, how about my next book? Is it going to be Pulitzer Prize worthy? Or, well, wait a minute, I haven't won a National Book Award yet, right? Like, when is it ever enough?
What about the Nobel Prize for Literature as well?
Right. Like, so is it ever enough? The kid playing in the sandbox doesn't care about building the best sandcastle. That comes in later when society teaches us the measuring stick. And in many cases, we need that in order to thrive as a society. I don't know if I really believe that. And I'm not a wonderologist, but I do know that what I knew in that sandbox was free of that measuring stick until it wasn't. And that's what I want to get back to.
So we've almost finished. When we have the bonus material, I'm going to be discussing how to deal with criticism or negative feedback, because I feel that I've got a lot out of being in a writer's circle for 25 years that helps me deal with my partner when I get negative criticism and feedback. So we're going to be looking at that and see if Laura's got any ideas about how we can deal with it in a constructive and good way. And we'll be doing that in the bonus material. But before we head in that direction, as a witness on The Meaningful Life, I have to ask you, what makes your life meaningful?
Well, I mean, many things. I'm blessed to have 2 adult children whom I love and a bonus child, son-in-law, and a grandchild on the way, living here, interpersonal relationships, connecting with nature. And when I say connecting with nature, I don't just mean trees and mountains and lakes. We are nature, I believe. So connecting with each other and our true natures. Also, writing, teaching writing, leading retreats, very similar to you is how I find meaning in my life. But I say that writing is my practice, my prayer, my meditation, my way of life, and sometimes my way to life. And I think it's important to find meaning and then isolate it and write it down so that you can be reminded of it in hard times. And one of my writer's statements is, and it's a movable feast, it can morph and change, but right now it is, I write to shine a light on a dim or otherwise pitch black corner, to provide relief for myself and others. And so I come from a place of service to self and others, and that's what makes my life meaningful. But I have learned that the writing isn't me. It is of me, but it is not me.
It comes through you?
It can come through me, yes. Well, that gets back into that intuitive place. But I think that the cautionary piece of what I want to say right now is that the minute we're so identified with what is meaningful to us is the minute that it loses its meaning. So that is to say that writing is of me, just like teaching, just like leading retreats, just like being a mother, soon to be grandmother, friend, etc. It's of me, but it's not me. So I think the ultimate meaning is asking yourself what you identify yourself by, and it better be something that's inside of you, not defined by the world outside of you. And that takes a lot of practice, and I'm not always good at it.
Well, that's a very interesting idea and one I'm going to be contemplating. So thank you very much for that. If you want to know how to deal with criticism or negative feedback, you can hear that in the bonus material, and you can subscribe directly via Apple or Spotify. We're also available on Amazon Music. And if you want to become a supporter of The Meaningful Life and unlock the bonus material this way, here are the details.
You've been listening to The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. You can follow Andrew on Twitter, like him on Facebook, and please leave a review wherever you consume your podcasts. Making, editing, and distributing The Meaningful Life comes with substantial costs, and we'd like to ask for your help. Visit our website, andrewgmarshall.com/podcast, where you can join our supporters club and unlock bonus material for every program, send in a letter to be discussed by Andrew and his guests, and join a community of other people seeking to make their life meaningful. At the gold level, you get even more benefits. Production of The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall is by Michael Dooney. Social media by Madeleine Healy. Sound engineering and theme tune by Sebastian de la Luz Mendoza. And I'm Susie Colick. Please tell your friends and spread the word. Thank you.
If you love to travel, Capital One has a rewards credit card that's perfect for you. With the Capital One Venture X card, you earn unlimited double miles on everything you buy. Plus, you get premium benefits at a collection of luxury hotels when you book on Capital One Travel. And with Venture X, you get access to over 1,000 airport lounges worldwide. Open up a world of travel possibilities with the Capital One Venture X card. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. Lounge access is subject to change. See CapitalOne.com for details.